So, welcome to Failing to Fail, the Spiderweb software way. I would like to thank you sincerely for taking a chance on this talk, being as most of you have no idea who I am, and I'm keeping you from your day drinking. My name is Jeff Vogel, and I run a company called Spiderweb Software, which I started in 1994. We're a little company, 2 full-time employees now. It used to be 3. Most people have never, ever heard of us, but we've been around for a very long time. Turn-based indie fantasy role-playing games. Very low budget, very retro, a lot of words, a lot of dialogue, very story-heavy, intricate settings. We do them for Windows, Mac, iPad, Linux, and Android when we can get someone to do the port for us. These are some of the series that I have worked on over the past. They are not household names. This is a full list of the full-length games that we have released for money. The games in italics are full remasters. We don't half-ass our remasters. When we remaster it, we redo everything. The other games are completely all new full-length titles, and we write pretty big games. God knows you don't want to count all that, but it's over the time we've been in business, we've released 16 full-length all-new games and 8 remasters. What do we do? Well, this is our very first game, Exile Escape from the Pit, which we released in January of 1995. And just to be clear, even by the standards of the time, this was a pretty darn cheap-looking game. It's adorable, it's functional, it's a clearly recognizable Ultima knockoff, but you know, it's cheap and scruffy. In comparison, about a month and a half ago, we released Avernum 3 Ruined World, which is a remaster of Avernum 3, which is itself a remaster of Exile 3 Ruined World. So we've been around long enough that we are doing remasters of remasters. And you know, if you look at this, I mean, graphically, production values, it's fine. You know, we're not crapping ourselves up there. It's reasonable. No one's gonna mistake it for a AAA title or something, but it's basically functional. We don't write hits. Now, don't get me wrong. I have nothing against hits. I would love to have a hit. I think it's a great thing to shoot for. It's just not what we do. We try to service a respectable niche with competent games in order to sustain a pleasant, sustainable middle-class income. So, why am I up here? Indie developers love and should love postmortems. They love the stories of creating a thing because you can sort of pick through it magpie-like and look for elements of the story that you can use to help yourself. Well, this is a postmortem too, except it's not a postmortem of a game, but of a career. Because I am older than the Stones and the Dirt. I have been writing indie games continuously for a living longer than, I'm not gonna say everyone, but the list of people who have been doing it longer is not long, and it's by a matter of months. Indie games, as a big thing, are new. They're really new. We only became a full, big $100 million a year industry in like the last 5 or 6 years. So the idea of how to do a full career, a 20, 30, 40-year career in this industry is very much an open question. So it's not talked about much. 40 years, my God, there isn't gonna be a planet left then. So that's the purpose of this talk, to start approaching this question. How do you keep the ball rolling? And so I'm gonna tell you a story about the last 25 years, a couple lame, funny anecdotes, and a couple things that I've observed about the nature of our industry. I'm not gonna have any answers for anybody, because you're all your own artists, but perhaps some things I say might help you to ask a better quality of question. So this is the old person part of the talk. And I've observed that there is nothing that young people hate more than old people talking about what things were like when the world was young. Ooh, punch cards. My first computer was a cinder block with a keyboard duct taped to it. Yeah, there's gonna be a tiny bit of that, but I promise to try to bring it around to something that might be valuable to you. So how did I get started? I was a really, really weird kid. When I was 5, I spent all of my time in my bedroom with a pencil and paper drawing increasingly elaborate mazes because they fascinated me. I was lucky enough to have worried but basically supportive parents. 1975 or so, my dad went to a bar with friends and he came home and said, Jeff, I saw this weird thing I'd never seen before. I thought you'd find it interesting. And he described to me a thing called Pong. And he was right, it did sound awful interesting, but I couldn't try it because even in 1975, 5-year-olds hanging out in bars was not going to fly. But 1 year later, on a Washington State ferry, I found this big old wooden box where you could put a quarter in the front, and you could fire rectangular torpedoes at these two-dimensional boats for 70 seconds, and if you did it really well, you could do it for 20 more seconds. And even then, my tiny, little, barely alive pea brain knew that this was my thing. This was my bag. Writing video games for a living was an idea that compelled me all through my childhood, I read everything I could about video games, about programming. I played them whenever I got the chance. When I was 10, I walked into my 4th grade classroom and there were people with this weird looking blue book and some funny shaped dice. And once again, I didn't look at it for like 2 or 3 seconds before it had colonized my brain. And that night I was bugging my parents, please, oh my God, take me to the mall so I can buy this. And that was how I got started with Dungeons and Dragons. My school library had a program where kids could write books and you could put them in the school library and then other kids could check them out. And so I immediately had to learn to type hunt and peck style, and I wrote my first D&D module, put it in the library. Now at the news media at the time, even the most prestigious outlets, was starting to run stories about the evil of gamers, about how there are these treacherous, evil, corrupt, insidious creatures who must be feared, a proud media tradition that continues to this day. And as a result, a concerned parent called the school library, and as a result of that, I am the only person I know personally who has had a book banned from a school library. This is the module that I wrote, art also by me, The Tunnels of Grok, and you will note in the title that I spelled tunnels with the somewhat less common LE spelling. What was the point of all that? I have been gifted with a gift that is almost unprecedented in the whole of human experience. I am older than the art form in which I work. Now, this is one of my all-time favorite quotes by William Goldman, writer and screenwriter best known for making The Princess Bride. Nobody knows anything. And he was saying this about the film industry, which is a far better understood industry than ours. Video games are young. Nobody knows anything. We're still scrambling to figure out, how do we design these things? How do we create these things? How do we test these things? How do we sell these things? How do we market these things? How do we add loot boxes to our $100 million project without causing to blow up on the launch pad? Nobody knows anything. And if you think you know a rule, one of you out there, your fortune and your fame might be figuring out the way to break that rule. And in 2 days, grown-up GDC is going to start. Real GDC is going to start. And these halls are going to be filled with Microsoft people, Electronic Arts people, and Activision people walking down the hall like they're too cool for school and looking at me like there's something they just scraped off their shoe. And there's going to be high-powered consultants here whose job is to charge a fortune to stand in the corner of the room and pretend they're the person who knows something. Don't be fooled. Nobody knows anything, and this is your art form just as much as theirs. Sue. Don't patronize me. Okay. My first game was a thing called shareware, which was a marketing technique. What was shareware? Well, in 1994, most software was sold in boxes on store shelves. And shareware is based on the bananas radical idea, wait a second, what we're gonna do is we're gonna write demos of our games, small portions, and people are free to spread their demos to everyone that they knew. They could put them up on BBSs, they could put them on American Online, they could give copies of the demos to their friends on the off chance they had any. And if you liked the demo, then you pirated it 90% of the time. But sometimes you got the full version by sending me money. Now, how did these demos get around and how did the money come back? Because bear in mind, at this time, there wasn't really an internet. We're back to 1994. There was no real web browser. There was no real web. Most people This is my first 14 4K modem, which was capable of downloading my 1.2 megabyte first game demo in a blazing 90 minutes. You used these. How was your game distributed? Well, you could put your demo on AOL, CompuServe, Prodigy. These were services that cost $3 an hour to be on. That's how much the internet cost in 1994, $3 an hour. You could get demos by buying magazines, which have shareware on discs in the front. You could go to your local Office Max or CompUSA and spend $10 for a disc with 30 to 200 shareware demos to try out. Excuse me. You want a discoverability problem. This is a discoverability problem. And finally, my favorite, you could go to the mall and you could go to kiosks and you could go to shops, and then there were walls covered with discs with shareware demos on them. So you would go and you would pay up to $10 for a shareware demo. You would take it home, you put it on your computer, and if you liked it, you would call me on the phone and say, hey, I got your demo, I want the full game. And I'd say, hey, the full game is $25. And then you would say, you freaking con artist, I paid $10 for this disc, and then proceed to yell at me for upwards of 5 hours. So as you liked the game, you wanted to send money back. You mailed me a check using a stamp. You would get a postal money order from the post office. You would mail me cash. One Viking mailed me $25 in change. The envelope went like this, ching, 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 ching. And finally, if you could get a credit card, a bank to trust you, your small business could gain the ability to accept credit cards, which almost never happened. Put a pin in that, I'll get back to that later. So, it's 1994, I'm in grad school, and I hate it. My wife at the time has already quit grad school and gotten a real job, and we decide to live the dream and actually own a computer. I will, as an aside at this point, I have been very lucky in my life in the opportunities I've been given and the background that I have that just enabled me to learn to program when I was a child. I want to make it very clear that that fact has not escaped me. Now, here's your standard old person statistics for our first computer, which cost about $3,700 of today dollars, adjusted for inflation. It came with 8 megabytes of RAM, which could be upgraded to a lofty and princely 16 megabytes for only $680 of today dollars. I bought Code Warrior to write programs because I liked doing that. And if you wanted to learn to program at the time, there was no internet, so there were no discussion groups. So you just went to the local bookstore, you bought books, and you stared at them until little pinpricks of blood started appearing on your forehead. Got a computer. I want to play a role-playing game because that's totally my bag, but I couldn't find any. So I figure, what the hell? There's no role-playing games. I might as well write one. And if there had been good role-playing games at the time, I probably never would have written one. But I just happened to get another lucky break. You're going to see this chart again. I got into a trough in the business cycle. What this chart says is that industries have a tendency to go through boom times and bust times. It is a very important concept to understand. I'll get back to it when I talk about today. I hate grad school. I can live my lifelong dream. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a full-length fantasy role-playing game, and what the hell, release it to try to get some pizza money. So now I got to sit in a room and stare at the wall. What the heck am I going to do? I'm going to live my dream, but what am I going to write? How am I going to write it? So it doesn't take me long. I come up with the idea. I loved these games as a kid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to every single game I liked as a kid and steal the single best idea from every one. And I'm going to, in my craftsman way, amalgamate them into what I hope is a cohesive and satisfying whole. Indie games are great for innovation. I love innovation, but innovation is not the only path. You must remember that every single one of us stands on the shoulders of giants. I looked at what I liked to play, and then I copied it. That is my creative process. And my second lesson is, this is all going to be about finding my creative process, my way of doing business, and the importance of defending it. And this is going to sound like sort of artsy-fartsy, ooh, follow your bliss, man, advice. No, it's not. It's very hard-nosed practical advice, and I'll tell you why. Most of the people you're going to run into in this thing are looking at their career over a time frame of 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, which is reasonable, especially if you're trying to get started. But that's not the time frame I think in. I'm thinking about in 20 years, in 10 years, in 40 years. I want to know what your career writing shareware games is going to be like in 40 years. And that's a long time. If you're going to work in that length of time, and you're going to be operating at a very peak level of efficiency, because you need to, in this business, you need to create a life, you need to create a mindset, you need to create a process that is not gonna rub at you. Because if there's something that's rubbing at you, if there's something that's putting you off your feed, over the next 40 years, it is going to rub you down to a nub. So, I'm writing a game. I do my grad school stuff during the day and I work on the game at night. Fortunately, I was in my 20s, so I had infinite energy. I spent 4 months hacking out something like an engine. My wife at the time was enormously supportive. She drew these adorable little cartoon graphic icons for me, art that I still get emails requesting to this day. I spent about 5 minutes making the world, placing the walls, placing the swords, giving the orcs dialogue, another month testing it, and then it was done. I had a complete, functional, massively flawed whole. But I had something I could hand to people and say, see this? This is a game. It was massively flawed. It embarrassed me deeply, but then again, every product I ever write embarrasses me deeply. But this is one of my guiding phrases when working this business. In the end, you know, you struggle to ship the game, but at some point you got to push the button. At some point you got to kick the thing out the door. If I double the amount of time working on a game seeking perfection, I need to double the amount of sales that I get from that game to justify it. Doubling your sales is hard. Time is valuable. I am always striving to be the only thing better than good, which is good enough. I get another lucky break. I'm on Usenet, which is the only discussion forum on the internet. At this time, the internet was small enough that only one insane, anarchic discussion board covers the whole thing. The Fantasoft had a hit game called Realms, and they wanted to get in publishing, so they offered me a really good deal in order to take my orders for me and give me sort of a basis of a couple thousand people to tell about my game. They were enormously helpful to me. I probably would not have a business if it wasn't for their help. Third lesson, I strongly recommend whenever possible that you be lucky. I tend to get in a lot of trouble when I say this. There are a lot of people who, just to get through the day, they really need to believe that they live in a deterministic world that contains some measure of justice. But that is not the case, especially when you're trying to live in art. Eventually you're gonna need a lucky break. Eventually you're gonna need someone to vouch for you. And all you can do until that time is work your butt off so that when your lucky break comes, you are fully ready to jump on it and take advantage of it. So I'm starting games, so I have to do all the tedious legal business stuff. I have to research what it takes to get a business license and then do that, pick a business name, all of that stuff. So my next bit of advice, have a quality accountant. And I know you're thinking, this is a professional conference. Why are you telling me this tedious 101 level stuff? Because I have lost count of the times when I've talked to a seasoned independent professional who should know better, and they're asking me questions, and I'm like, dude, you need an accountant, not me. Because once you get in the point where you need to pay taxes, where you need to do payroll, the mistakes are many and they are high impact. If you screw up your payroll withholding, all that is going to earn you is a tiny little sympathetic shake of the head from your auditor before he destroys you. I'm selling a game, so I need to pick a price, which is as difficult back then as it is now. Fortunately, at the time, all successful shareware games were $25, so I picked that. That is, in today dollars, $41. Now imagine that. Imagine actually being able to look people straight in the eyes and charge them $41 for a game. But the tragic truth of it is that we are making a bespoke artisanal product for a niche market, and we should be able to charge this. It is only the overcrowding that keeps us from able to charge what we're worth. But that's the tragedy of the business. Shareware, so I have to make a demo. And another tragedy of my business is that I always make my demos too big, 10 hours, 20 hours. I released a game with like a 30-hour demo. I shudder to think of the amount of money that insanity cost me over the years. But I've always been weirdly proud of it too. One thing that helped me sleep at night is that pretty much everyone who got my game, one, tried it and found it worked on their computer, two, played it enough to know they enjoy it. And since we're indie developers and we like to act like we subscribe to a higher ethical standard, One of my mottos has always been, look, if you don't like my game, I don't want your money. I'm gonna be the only person you're gonna run into in this thing who think the main problem with the Steam's refund policies is that they're not generous enough. I've had a 1-year, no questions asked refund policy forever, and I've never had problems with it, because by and large, the people who pay money for games are pretty honest. It's done, and I'm out of excuses. It's time for me to press the button to upload the demo to America Online and change my life forever. And I'm terrified. I'm completely terrified. And I'm only able to do it by making what I call a progressive screwdriver. And here is how you make that. A screwdriver is an alcoholic beverage. It is orange juice with vodka added. And what I did is I made a screwdriver, drank it down, and then just added more vodka. When I pressed the upload for my first game, I was wasted. And God help me, it's sold. We got a little core of people buying the game because of our publisher. Because of that attention, we got probably one of the single biggest stroke of luck. A copy of Macworld put us on their shareware CD, which was enormously successful. And because our game there weren't many role-playing games, and ours was competent, we got a lot of word of mouth. And a lot of people say, don't count on word of mouth. Don't count on word of mouth. Word of mouth isn't going to get you through. And I'm like, I've always been reading it like, good Lord, what else do I have? My games are slow paced. They're not good for YouTube and Twitch streaming. They're cheap. They're not good for getting press. We're never going to get a proper publishing deal. We can't afford advertising. And even if we could, advertising almost never works. Word of mouth is all we ever got. And to be perfectly honest, you need to write a game that's good enough that someone's going to be passionate enough about it to bug their friends and talk on forums about it. If you don't have that, then you may have a problem. So anyway, this is what a game selling looked like in 2017. Thanks to luck and thanks to Fanasoft's kind help, we made $53,000 in today dollars in our first year. And that's solid money. That's a middle-class income. For a grad student, that's amazing. And so I'm like, okay, this is for real. And the best thing about it, I think one of the great miracles of being an indie creator in any field, is that I owned my work. When you make a video game, you've made a miracle. You've made a machine that prints money. Normally when you make a machine that prints money, it's a felony and they send you to jail. But here, they let you get away with it. And even if that machine isn't making money right now, you wait 5 years, you remaster it. It might put some more ink in it. It might start kicking out money then. There has hardly been a day gone by since I released Exile that I have not made money off of it. And owning your work is one of the greatest things in the world. And even back then, I knew if I wanted to try and make a go of it, my whole story was going to be about two things: making a back catalog and getting myself some fans. So at this point, my grad school performance is pretty much non-existent. So I take a master's and I get the heck out. I port Exile to Windows, writing games on Windows 3.1. The less said about that, the better. It took me 3 days to draw one 256 color icon onto a screen. I put that demo on America Online. That sells too. Great, so now I need to write another game. What am I gonna do? Well, it's the computer game industry. I take the name of my previous game and I put a 2 after it. About this time, now everyone in this business is familiar with the phenomenon where your game sells great and then the sales suddenly drop by 90%. These days, in this enlightened accelerated time, that usually takes about 3 days. Back then, it took me a few months. But not long after I decided to go full time, my sales just immediately fall into the toilet and I felt like I was going to die. I took that limitless terror and funneled that energy into working onto Exile 2 harder. Now, at this point, now I'm making a new game, all of a sudden the pattern for how I like to do things starts to be clear. I like a small company. I like to work alone. I keep doing that. Most of my code is functional, so I keep reusing it. I reuse most of my assets, most of my graphics, most of my sounds. I am merciless about reusing assets. I have used the same wolf icon in like 15 different games. If it's a decent icon, it looks like a wolf. The next game, it's still gonna look like a wolf. People make fun of me for it all the time, but I'm also still in business. Whenever I release a new game, I look for the 25% of it that's the worst, and I redo that. I am the leanest and the meanest of developers. And again, this is all part of finding my creative process. People make fun of me for it all the time, but it's just the way I work. And if you're not like that, If you need bespoke art and if you need custom music, if that's your process, then go with it. You know, you have to earn more sales to make up for it, but if that's what you need to do to feel happy with your life in this business, that's what you got to do. But if you find a thing where you feel that it's okay to be cheap, do not let anyone shame you out of being cheap. Finish Exile 2. It takes a little over a year. It's like Exile, but a tiny bit better. So it's still selling. I have to write a new game. Well, my last game had a 2 after the name, so I decided, being it's the video game industry, I changed the 2 to a 3. Now, by this time, I have pretty much entirely strip-mined my childhood of good ideas, so I evolve my design process. Instead of just stealing ideas from the games from when I was young, I look at the games that came out in the previous 3 years, and I steal the best single idea from every one of those. Again, innovation is great, and it is one of the greatest strengths of being an indie. But another of the greatest strengths of being an indie is that we have the ability to pick up the genres that are too small for AAA people to take advantage of, puzzle games, roguelikes, adventure games, and exploit those. And because there's so many games, there aren't that many underutilized genres, but a new genre re-becomes underutilized every year. It's 1997, the web exists, so I code this utterly gorgeous website. It's on spiderwebsoftware.com still. It's not on spiderweb.com because someone has been squatting on that URL for the last 25 continuous years. We decide to go independent. We break from Fanosoft and we start doing everything ourselves. To do this convincingly, I have to gain the ability to take credit cards. Now, at this time, no bank will trust me because nobody seriously believes it is possible to make a living, make money on the internet. They think I'm going to collect a bunch of credit cards and then fly off to Honduras or whatever. So I beg bank after bank after bank, look, I'm a real business. I'm making real money. I need to be able to take credit cards. And finally, one bank, to prove that I'm not a con artist, they asked me for a printout of my website. So I print out my website, I hand it to them, they look at me like I'm a wizard, and then they sent me a credit card swipe machine to go in my apartment, so to order, people call me on the phone, and I type the number in with my finger. We program our own online store, we host our own demos, we handle our own file handling, we do all our own security, we do all of the own horrible stuff that services like iTunes and Steam make frictionless. And I just have to say, sometimes take a moment to appreciate how amazing everything is. Like, I hear indies complain all the time about the cut that Apple and Steam take, but all of the stuff that Steam does for you and makes easy, I've had to do myself, support myself, a la carte. I've hired full-time employees to do the stuff that Steam does. I know how much it costs, and more importantly, they do too. So if you want to be mad at Steam, fine, but bear in mind that that percentage is not going to shift. We finish Exile 3. It's big. It actually contains some innovation in addition to the theft. There's still not a lot of role-playing games out. It's exactly the right game at the right time, and it's a big hit. Now, I say that I had a shareware hit. Now, these days, when you have a hit, that means that you get to build a mansion out of yachts. In 1997, having a hit was something less different. My first year sales from Exile 3 was in today dollars, $330,000. And that's, don't get me wrong, that's serious money. That's life-changing money. That's, have a game that sells like that, you're going to be eating out on that game for the rest of your life. That's I'm going to be in this business for a long time money. But it's still, I have to work for a living money. And by the way, before I leave this slide, I beg you, please support bigcatclipart.com and the good work they do. My radiant wife, Marianne, who is the wind beneath my wings, has a job that she hates, so she quits her job and comes on board with me, and since then we've been writing Spiderweb software together. She is my business manager and keeps every single thing running. At this point, we're doing all our own everything ourselves. Most of our orders come in over the phone, and we talk to humans. People talk a lot about how on the internet the anonymity makes it easier for people to be mean to each other. But anyone who's done phone customer service, I assure you, people have no problem being utterly inhuman to you when they're talking to you like a person. This is a key lesson for anyone who runs a small business or deals in a creative way. It is a human constant that a certain number of people, let's say 10%, no matter what the demographic, if you're talking about people who are left-handed, people with red hair, people who are gamers, people who wear mismatched socks, a certain percentage of those people are always going to be mean. A certain percentage of those people are always going to be cranks, and there's nothing you can do about it. And when you're building your business world and your mind environment, you have to take that into account. And you should remember that often the people who are angriest at you are not going to be completely anonymous. They're going to be the people who 5 years ago were your most devout fans. And then you changed a thing and it was their favorite thing and they don't like you anymore. Just remember, there is always a very thin line between love and hate. And so if you're gonna make it for your 40 years, shelter your brain. If there is a sort of input that puts me off my feet and slows down my work, I have to be working at top efficiency to keep this ball rolling. If something is keeping me from working, I cut it out mercilessly. I have no idea what my Steam reviews are. None. I never go on my forums unless I absolutely have to. If a new game is out, I have to look on it to see if there's any bugs, I look at my forums. But otherwise, I never look at forums. I'm on Twitter, but if people start being mean to me on Twitter, I quit. And then I go back on when the coast is clear. And let me be clear. I'm a white guy, so I get less abuse. I'll be straightforward about that. Bear in mind, I still get abuse. I have gotten some input from out in the wild that has utterly and legitimately terrified me. But other people will get more abuse than I am because of who they are. It is not fair. It is one of many unfair things that you are going to run into in this business. But no matter what happens, once again, there's going to be cranks and you can't do anything. So you have to shelter your brain because in the end, the first order of business is your work and producing it. And one more side note, don't be afraid to fire a customer. They say that the customer is always right. That's not true. Customers are wrong all the time. But the truth is nobody ever won an argument with a customer. There are times when you're going to have to say to someone, look, my thing isn't for you. I can't add that feature. I can't write that expansion. I just can't do the thing you want. Offer them a refund and send them on their way. If someone is on the forums and you can see that they're just there to cause trouble, ban them. If people are making a noise, that person who is screwing up your business, you shouldn't have banned them. Ban them too. The beatings will continue until morale improves. Daddy is home. If you're on your forums and someone is just there to make trouble, you can tell, and some of them are good about it. They'll just push right up to the line and push back. Push right up in the line and push back. People who are nice and who support you will understand. About this time, I also start, trying to help other shareware people do what I do. I create this website, which is still up. It is hilariously out of date. It's like 20 years old. But I've always written talks, given talks, written articles, done everything I could to help shareware developers because I believe in it. I really do. So in a very short period of time, we go from not believing it is possible to make money on the internet to believing you can only make money on the internet. And even at the time, it was fully obvious that this was ridiculous. Basically, people would just make tech companies. They'd try to grow it really, really fast. Even though the company was obviously doomed, they'd try to get enough interest in it to get in a whole bunch of IPO and investor money, cash out, move to a different continent, and then the whole thing exploded, which of course it did, as it had to. Fortunately, we live in a much more enlightened time now, and we can be assured that that will never happen again. The bubble was a big help for us. Everyone and their cousin was making a video game website because they thought there was money in that, and we had a lot of free PR from it. They sent out shareware CDs. We got on a lot of them. Between having a successful game and sort of splash onto us from the internet boom, we had to ask ourselves, now what? What's our business going to do? What's it going to be like? Because we could get investors. We could build a real business. I could make games that my parents aren't ashamed of. What am I going to do? We could build something really big. We thought about it, we had some conversations, and we basically did nothing. We hired one full-time employee to do for us all the stuff that Steam does for us now so that we could go to Disney World sometimes. That's pretty much all we changed. And just to be clear, we have no regrets. And if you want to build a big, real company, if you want to be a Viking, my God, go for it. You have nothing but my admiration. If that's the way you need to be to live in this business, do that. But me, I'm a humble toy maker. I sit in my garage and I make little toys for all the happy boys and girls. That's my life. That is what I do. That is what I'm always going to do. Live or die. That's my bag. And just one more fun aside. There was so many games magazines that for a short time it was very, very good money to write about video games. I had days where it's like, oh God, I want to work on this game, but I have to write game criticism because it makes so much money. Oh, it feels good to laugh. Of course, that ended, and yet someday it may return. When enough people in a field go out of business, and the demand for some reason increases, you get a growth period in the business cycle. You just have to be lucky enough and ready enough to catch it when it comes. So over the next 4 years, we write more games. We write Blades of Exile, which is Exile, but with this really dumb, obvious scenario creation system that's simple enough that anybody can use it. And we get piles and piles of scenarios for it. It's still popular. We open sourced it. I decided to write a new IP. I write a game called Nethergate, which is something almost like innovation. It's a historical role-playing game with Celts versus Romans in ancient Britain. I read actual books. And so this is what it looks like, and usually I switch my graphics around. I'm trying to get a little bit more like productive values. It had a really innovative story structure where it's one story, but you can play two different sides and see it from both sides. It kind of seemed like an educational game, which is death, but it sold okay. And I was getting really sick at this point of everyone telling me, your graphics suck, your graphics suck, your graphics suck. So I spend some actual money, I hire actual artists and get graphics that are somewhere in the same continent as the standard for graphics at the time. The result, of course, was that every day people told me, your graphics suck, your graphics suck, your graphics suck. That was the last time I ever made the mistake of making an effort. It's really important to note in indie games that pretty much every game is going to be someone's favorite game. Your goal is to make a game that is enough people's favorite game to keep you in food and shelter. And this is why you should always be very scared of someone asking for more curation on a platform. Because one person or one panel of people can never, ever predict in the end what the market is going to like. The only thing that can decide what the market will like is the market. We'd been in this for a few years. Our games were selling consistently. We had a real fan base. We had role-playing games are an evergreen niche, and we served it well. Everything seemed to be just cruising along fine. So that's when we almost went out of business. Suspense. Our next series was the Geneforge series, which I'm enormously proud of and is next in line for a really nice remastering. The Geneforge games were actually innovative. It was a sci-fi fantasy hybrid. There's no bad guys in Geneforge, there's just factions that you choose between. The gameplay is very open-ended. You can play an entirely pacifist character, get through the whole thing with trickery and never do a fight. At this point, the Exile games are embarrassingly old, so we start remastering them as Avernum games. And once again, those sell great. We hum along for another 6 years. We do 2 Geneforge games, we do 2 remasters, we have fans. Every year in November, we do a sale, 10% off. Can you imagine? That always does really well. Around this time, we're making in the 200,000s a year for 3 full-time employees. And that's most of the time that's around what we make. And that was pretty solid. So, 2007, we've been doing this for about 13 years. I remastered Blades of Exile as Blades of Avernum. It has a really powerful scripting engine people can use to make scenarios. It takes forever to write it, and it was just too complicated. People weren't really as into making adventures with it. I write Geneforge 3, and quite frankly, I was lazy. It's been a long time I was complacent, I slacked off, and I made a game that was just too similar to the 2 previous games. They just didn't do that well. they went down a bunch. And I'll just show you numbers to show what, for us, almost going out of business means. 2003, we make almost $300,000 in today dollars. The next year, it's down by over a quarter. And again, 3 full-time employees. We have a ton of expenses doing the things that Steam does for us. And on top of that, we got 2 kids. And you know the joke, how much money does it take to raise kids? All of it. So this seems like a pretty healthy number, but this means we're bouncing checks. At this point, we're kind of running scared. And so at this point, I wise up and try to get over my complacency. I start redouble my energy and start redoing everything I can. And once again, here's some advice that seems like sort of artsy. Oh yeah, you always have to keep growing as a human, man. Have you ever looked at your hands? No. You have to keep growing as an artist, and this is hard-nosed practical advice, because remember, for the most part, we're toy makers. We sell amusements. We sell things that tickles people's brains. We sell surprise, and complacency and predictability and repetition are the death of that. If you want to write a sequel, great. Sequels are awesome, but your sequel better introduce something new, and it better introduce that new thing early, because if people pick up your game and go, yeah, I've done all this, and I don't need to do more of this, then you're going to start bouncing checks. We extend the Exile series into Vernum 4, 5, and 6 with a completely revamped engine. That does really well. We redo a lot of stuff about how we do GeneForge 4. I expand the scripting engine and create really complicated multi-stage events and introduce them as soon as the game starts. The next 2 GeneForge games sell really well. And then the most surprising thing I could have possibly imagined happened. Indie games became big. Indie bubble is not really the correct term. It was not really a true speculative bubble. It was more, I should call it the indie glut. But I'm not going to go much into the factors that caused it. It's been much discussed. I will only add one factor about why indie games got big that I don't think gets enough attention. Indie games are successful because people like us. We're the little guy. We're the scrappy tinkerers in our garages fighting against the big monolithic corporations. This is an enormously powerful and moving archetype. Whole teen movies are made about this. And it is important to remember that we are likable, and it's important to concentrate on staying likable, because that likability is one of our greatest assets. If you're likable, that is what will make people stick with you through rough times, and that's what people will make people go to your Kickstarter and spend $1,000 for a $15 game. Steam's big, indie games are big. I write a whole new game engine and a whole new game, which looks a little bit prettier, called Avedon. And between having a nice-looking new game and back catalog, we're able to make a lot of money. And I have to return again to the idea of luck. Now, at this point, I've been making indie games for decades, and I was sort of humming along, but all of a sudden, indie games became big when nobody was expecting it. There was a huge demand for product, and hey, I was sitting on years and years and years of back catalog, and as a result of that, I was able to get more deals and make more money than I, in any remote way, deserved. We got on all the fashionable online stores. We lucked into a meeting with Steam. And I'm sure a lot of people ask, Jeff Vogel, why did he get that detail? Why is he in that place? Well, one of the things is I always try to be the most frictionless person to work with. I'll negotiate about contracts, but not very much. I'm not a hard ass. I answer emails right away. I pay contractors right away. If someone asks for assets, they have them in their hands by the end of the day. If you're as frictionless as possible to work with, you will be amazed at what opportunities it opens for you. We lower our games to $10 because Steam tells us that's what we have to do to be on Steam. We do so, and God knows we made it up in volume. And at the beginning of the indie glut, this is how much money we made. It is, again, this is life-changing money. It's just the culmination of a very lucky break, followed by a lot of work, and it's more than we deserve. The indie glut starts to rise. People see that indie games are big and they start writing them. We do our standard thing. We write 2 more new games. We write 2 more remasters. We make them as good as we could. We sell a ton. And then as more indie games flow in, we sell a lot less. Massive competition means we can't make it up in volume anymore. We raise our prices to $20, which is where we are now. Indie development enters the recession period of its business cycle, a recession period that I suspect will probably last for a very long time because it's tough to make a living as an artist. Other people are writing indie games now. It's a hot thing. It even gets to be in rooms. You all appear, and I quietly get old. I don't think anybody could have possibly imagined how big video games are going to get. It's over $100 billion a year, which is pretty big. And this is a vicious industry. This is a nasty, competitive blood sport industry. And as much as we hate to think about it, we are, to some extent, in this room, all in competition with each other. There is only a finite number of Humble slots. There is only slots. There is only a finite number of Steam front page slots. And it's a zero-sum game. If I get an opportunity, someone else doesn't. But it is fantastic, perhaps necessary, that still sometimes we can come here as a summit to genuinely try to help each other, because we're artists and God knows nobody else cares about us. It's one of the few things that makes life doing this tolerable. A month and a half ago, we came out with another remaster, Vernum 3 Ruined World, and it's doing quite well. It's not setting the world on fire, but we're going to be able to keep writing games for a couple more years. And I'm going to alternate between new games and remasters as long as I can handle it. And when I write a game, I'm making a whole new game right now and a whole new IP, and whenever I have a question, I follow the same North Star that I always have. My process is I figure out what I want to play, and then I make that. And if my taste ever gets so bad that I fall out of line with the market, then I will receive my just punishment, and then I'll go write banking software or sell shoes. It helps that over the year we have a big fan base. People drift out from being our fans for a decade and then float back. We have a long back catalog, which we mercilessly exploit whenever we can. And one of the great things is that never be ashamed of an old game. If a game's fun, 10 years later, it's still going to be fun. Never go to sleep on your old products. If you believed in it once, 10 years later, keep believing in it. But this is kind of the real question. I've told you a story about how I managed to live a life that I dreamed of as a child and that a lot of people envy. Can you do it too? And that's the big question. And honestly, I have to believe that it is possible. If you write quality games consistently, if you're tenacious, if people like your games, if you build up a fan base, if you have the tenacity of the cockroach, then you will eventually make it, maybe. Making a living as an artist is hard. It's always been hard. It always will be hard. And I want to say reassuring things, but I'm too fundamentally honest to not. I have to tell the truth. It's possible, but it's rough. And people ask all the time, do you think I have what it takes to make it? What do I need to do to make it? And my favorite quote about this comes from noted stand-up comedian and banjo enthusiast Steve Martin. You should always try to write games that pass the P test. You want to write a game that's so compelling that people forget to P. If you let people test your game and you tell them you can't play it anymore, you should always be shooting. There should always be one person out of your testers, one weirdo who's grabbing you by the lapels and going, I got to keep playing this game. That is the goal, and it's hard. My God, I know it's hard. And that's why you can't quit your day job. You have to have until you have some confidence, until you're sure. And again, this is a process thing. Some people will prove me wrong, but I really believe, unless you're absolutely sure, don't quit your day job until you've got the game that you're going, this is it. This game is addictive. I will bet my life on it, because you kind of are. So I just want to end with a couple inspirational words, just because I am fundamentally cheery. In all of the havoc and all of the terror, please occasionally take a moment to be proud. People who do what we do, people who are artists and musicians and whatnot, are carrying on a tradition that is as old as humanity. The compulsion, when you see a blank canvas, a compulsion to fill that canvas with something, to take all of the weird stuff in your brain and go, blah, and hope that it lands on someone and makes their life better. what we do is a noble thing. And I ask you, it's a rough road ahead, but I ask you to not forget it and to be proud. I will be taking questions for a short time.
If you've got a question for Jeff, please come line up at the mic.
While people are coming up, I will say, if you follow my Twitter, you've already seen this. I was looking in my desk drawer and I found that this is a 3.5-inch floppy disk on it that says, "in case of emergency." I found it in my drawer where it's been sitting for about 15 years. And at some point about 15 years ago, I remember making this disk. I remember thinking, this thing, if I'm ever in trouble, I have to have this or everything's gonna explode. And I copied something on a disk and put it in a drawer. I have no idea what's on here. All I know is I can never get rid of this. I can never ever get rid of this thing. I'm gonna be buried with this. This is in my coffin. My head's gonna be on it like a pillow. Someone on Twitter says, you know, it might be a Linux reboot disk. Oh yeah, like I'm gonna take extra effort to keep running Linux. Okay, there's your hot take.
I have a question for you.
Oh sure.
So what was the degree you were working on? What was the Jeff that we missed out on because you decided to make games?
I was at Rutgers University in beautiful central New Jersey working on a PhD in applied mathematics because the world needs much more of that. And yeah, I just couldn't stand it. The whole point of grad school is to make your life so miserable that it forces you to decide to do something proper.
Hi, I know who you are because I am working on my first indie RPG, and I've looked at you and said that, well, theoretically it's possible.
Oh, sure.
I have not quit my J job yet, so I got that going for me.
Yeah, working on a game late at night. That is the artist's tradition.
So my question is that maybe this is too personal for you to answer, but I'm a one-man shop right now.
Okay.
I have lots of programming and design experience. The art is where I'm like kind of struggling, and so I'm at the point where I'm actually starting to ask the question: is like, how do I move forward with that? Do I go with a very like cheap indie look, like some of your early games, or do I like start investing in people to like start making art for me in a like more professional level? And I guess I was wondering what your insight of like when to know when to advance that.
So I'm trying to bring up this slide because this is the okay. Well, it's kind of visible.
Yeah.
So there's tons of free resources online. My mind is just shattered by the depth and the quality of resources you can license online for free or very reasonably priced. So be merciless. Real artists ship. Find what it takes to get your thing off the launch pad and download that. And of course, it's gonna come up to your creativity and a skill as a craftsman. You're gonna have to, you go on opengameart.com, you're gonna see 500 million icons. You have to pick out the ones that work together in a cohesive whole. You're probably gonna get to the point where it gets you 90% of the way there, and there's some things that you can only properly do with bespoke art. And when that happens, then you gotta find a real artist, and you gotta pay out some money. And that's still my process. When I'm designing a game, I look at all of my resources, my own back catalog of art. I look at the art that's free online that is of quality, and I say, okay, what can I make for cheap? But what do I gotta pay a person for? So my advice, make cruddy programmer, download stuff from sites, make cruddy programmer art for the rest, make a game, make it functional, and then show it to people and play them and ask yourself, do I got a live one here? And if you do, then it's time to deal with the whole other topic / universe of pain that is finding and dealing with freelancers. But yeah, that's the best advice I can give.
I guess just a real quick follow-up, like if it's not all about money, when do you know like when it's time to like maybe like advance your own skills and like work on your art skills to be like more full featured as opposed to?
Depends on who you are.
Yeah.
I'm bad at art, so I don't do it. But there are some people who are pretty good at art, and it's make an icon, see how it looks, see how long it takes. If your taste is good enough, you'll be able to tell if it's a good icon or not. Figure out how long it takes. Figure out how much money it would cost to have a freelancer do it. See how much money you got on hand, and then make the call. And it's just the sort of business skills that you're going to have to develop yourself.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, good talk.
Thank you very much.
2 quick questions. You had mentioned how fans could kind of turn from love to hate pretty quickly. Is it possible to go the other way around?
Oh, sure. Life is long. Over a course of 25, 30, 50 years, it's like a fan will like me, and then they'll hate me, and then they'll live their life for 10 years and forget I exist, and rediscover me again and go, yeah, and
Is it worth kind of like pursuing that particular moment to try to convert them back, or you just kind of like break it there?
I'm trying to convert my old fans back all the time through a process that I call releasing a game. I write the best thing that I can and put it out there. I'm certainly not focusing on individuals. And part of it, when I write so many games, I don't expect anyone to play all of my games because look at all this crap. Jesus Christ. I work on 2 different series at the same time that are very different. I have people who are fans of one series and hate the other series, and vice versa. Oh God, I had a really good point with that. No, I guess I didn't. No, I just make the things, and when I make a decision, I just ask what really works for this. And people are notoriously change-averse and risk-averse. If you change something, you're always going to lose people. But you got to change things or you're going to go crazy. So that's the game. You always got to make sure that when you change and you do a new thing, that thing you add is going to bring in fans to replace the ones you lost. Or hopefully increase the number.
Do you feel like the majority of your fan base existed before like the Steam and indie bubble, or?
Oh yeah, well remember, I was doing this for a living. I started doing it for a living in 1995, and Steam only became a thing that indies were crazy about 16 years later. So I'd been building fans forever. I made my own mailing list. If you can make your own mailing list, my God, that's a good mailing list. It's just a big red button that you hit it and $1,000 flies out. Make a fan base, cultivate your fan base. If at all possible, communicate with your fan base. I mainly do it by email, but I'll always answer an email. If someone cares about me that much, I'll always send their email back.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
You mentioned about peaks and valleys throughout your career.
Sure.
When it's a valley, how do you keep the sort of emotional fortitude to keep going forward?
So the question is, when it's a valley, when things are going hard, how do you keep your emotions on an even keel? And what I tend to use is methamphetamine, which is, oh, I'm in for it. Okay. Again, this is a very individual, very human, very person-to-person case. When I get terrified, I work harder. But I make sure to take time off. You're going to have hard times. You're going to have times when you're sad. You're going to have times when you're scared. You're going to have times when you're angry. You still need to eat. You need to sleep. Still need to maintain your relationships. And you just got to find your way to manage that. Like I said, I don't look at my forms. Only that my employees are forbidden to tell me how much money we're making. I never look at my sales. When I balance the checkbook every 3 months, then I know how much money we're making. Otherwise, I don't know, because if I find out, it's just going to stress me out. You figure out, you know your own brain, and I don't. Figure out the thing in your brain that enables you to deal with the terror, because you will always have some of the terror.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Maybe I'll suggest an SSRI over methamphetamine.
No half measures, man. I'm going out on top. Yes?
Hello, thanks for the talk. I was wondering, if you were starting out today, would you use your own engine again, or would you choose some of the existing engines?
I'd probably make my own engine, because I'm a total code. I enjoy programming enough and tech stuff enough, and this is an area that people argue about a lot, but I feel very passionately about. If at all possible, own the source code for your stuff. It is saved our butts so many times. And some people are thinking right now, I'm not a tech person. I'm a creator. I use an engine, so I don't have to learn how to code. So my source code wouldn't do me any good. To which I respond that what you may have overlooked is that you don't need to know how to program. If you have the source code, you find some hungry kid out of college, you hand him a basket of our Earth dollars, and you say, here's my mess, make it work. And then they disappear, and they come back, and your engine works. They have money and something to put on a resume. You have a working machine that spits out dollars, and you both get on with your lives. But you can only do it if you have the source code. So that is much more than you asked, but it's definitely, I'd write my own engine because I think it's fun. My engines suck, but I like writing them. I'm sick of everything in my job, so if there's something I like doing, I grab onto it with both hands.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
So you mentioned that you release a game about one game a year.
Yeah,
Could you talk
1.5 years.
a little bit about the decision? Like, is that a really deliberate choice to do one a year, and how much of the personal deadline?
It works for me. I find that if I've been working on one game for about a year and a half, I either need to ship it or do a Hemingway. I just can't. I can't stand looking at it anymore. So I get it a year and a half. It's a full game. It's basically functional. I've made it 25% better. Made 25% of what was bad in the last one better. I kick it out and go on to the next thing. I like having a lot of different games, and I think it's fun. And since we only have a few seconds left, 2 final pieces of advice. Don't be proud of not getting enough sleep. You need sleep to live. And 2, get a chair that's good for your back, because when your back goes, my God, you're going to miss it. Thank you very much.